Thank you very much for coming to this event in Parkland. I want to introduce you to Dr. David Joseph. He is a clinical psychologist from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. He is also the director of the Oakland Veterans Center. He is an expert in helping to lead veterans transition from the battlefield into the classroom. He currently provides treatment for the veterans with readjustment stress and combat military or the PTSD. And I'm going to transfer this over to Dr. Joseph, and he's going to do a presentation and hear from Dr. Joseph.
Cool. Thank you so much. Hi, folks. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be back here. I want to introduce myself just a little bit more to kind of know where I'm coming from. So I'm the director of the Oakland Vet Center. How many of you know what a vet center is? Not the one you have on campus. The one you pay for with your federal taxes. So the vet centers, for those of you that don't know, are part of the VA. We like to joke that we were the VA that answers the phone. That used to actually be our official slogan until the VA told us we had to change it. But the vet centers, we're a little bit different. Our mission is to provide what we call readjustment counseling or therapy or counseling. If we called it therapy, probably no one would come. So we call it readjustment counseling for a couple of types of veterans. And the veterans that we see at the vet center are veterans who have served in a combat zone. So if you served in a combat zone while serving in the United States military, regardless of what you did, regardless of whether or not you experienced combat, regardless of what your job was, you and your family can come to the vet center forever for free. Pretty cool. Now, the way that it works when you come to the vet center, and this is a little bit different from the VA, I have to be careful, I know I'm being taped. One of the things that's great about the vet centers, and I'm plugging the vet center because there also is one here, not very far from here. I think someone from the vet center is going to be here a little bit later, and he can plug it even more. But the great thing about the vet center is the way that you get to see a counselor at the vet center is you walk in and you go to the front desk and you say, I'm a veteran and I would like to see a counselor. And they say, did you serve in a combat zone? And you say, yes, I did. And they say, would you like a cup of coffee? And if it's early in the day, you should say yes. And then you wait a little bit and you get to talk to a counselor. And that's how it's done. Very, very accessible, very easy to do. The other group of veterans that we see are veterans who reported or experienced what we call military sexual trauma. Military sexual trauma is anything from intense harassment all the way up to and including rape in the military. And if you had that experience, if you served one day, even one day in the military, and that was an experience that you had, you and your family can come to the vet center forever for free. And the way that we assess whether that's an experience that you had or not is that we say, these are our eligibility criteria. Does this sound like one of these applies to you? And if you say yes, you're in. That's as easy as it is. So what that means is I spend most of my days working with staff and working directly with veterans, most of whom, if I think about who comes to the vet center, most of whom have deployed to a combat zone, many of them in a combat role. Most of the veterans that I see are what we would call combat veterans. 60, 70% of the veterans that I see, well, actually that number's shifting, but a good percentage of the veterans that I see are Vietnam veterans. We still have a World War II group that meets every 2 weeks. We have veterans that served in Lebanon and Panama and Nicaragua and Bosnia, the first Gulf War, and even some places that you didn't know there were combat operations. And then, of course, we have veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. And so many of the veterans that we talk to are dealing with kind of two issues. And the two issues that they're dealing with, and then we're going to really get into the details of this, but the two issues that they're dealing with are readjusting from serving in the military. When I say readjusting, I mean adjusting to living in the civilian world after serving in the military world. And believe it or not, even our Vietnam veterans are still working that out, some of them. It's not so easy to do, and we'll talk about why. And then, of course, for many of our veterans, they're also dealing with the effects of trauma. Sometimes multiple trauma, sometimes extensive trauma, and that includes things like post-traumatic stress disorder, which we'll talk more about, and traumatic brain injury. I was thinking before I really go into the details of my presentation today, we could spend a few minutes talking about the election. I'm kidding, we're not going to do that. Let's talk about numbers. And I felt like I just had to talk about the election somehow. California has the highest number of veterans of any state in the United States. Make up about 5% of the population at any one time. This is a really interesting slide. What this slide shows, as you're sort of trying to work it out, is the percentage of who is serving and who is not serving in the military at any one time. And what's really interesting about this slide, if you've never seen it before, is if you look at World War II, how much of the population was serving at any one time? Those of you who are good at reading graphs. This says 12%. It's also anywhere between 9 and 12% of the population was in the military during World War II. Now, during the longest sustained period of warfare in our nation's history, which was when? Right now. Until right now. The longest period that our nation has been at war for any one time, what percentage of the population served in the military? A little under 1%. What does that mean? What does that mean for us? Well, it means that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were largely fought by a very small group of people over and over and over and over again. Multiple deployments to and from those countries. I just met with a veteran who had 9 deployments. That's unusual, but not impossible. It also means, and this is really important, that if you served in the military, up in where I live in Oakland, we used to talk a lot about, there was a lot of talk about the 99% versus the 1%. Well, another way of looking at it is our military veterans are actually in some ways the 1%. The experiences that they have in the military are so radically different from a cultural perspective, so radically different from the experiences that those of us who don't serve in the military have. Their understanding of the world, their understanding of how to conduct yourself, about what happens in the world and doesn't happen, the terminology that they use, and we'll talk about that in a second, is so radically different from many of us who have not served, that the process of getting out of the military, we can now start to understand, is a really possibly difficult one because of how few veterans actually, how few folks in our country actually serve in the military. We don't think about that so much. The military is largely made up of men. It's 15% women, plus or minus. It is not, as we look at the trends that are going on today, we actually see that the military is, that number 15% is going to grow higher and higher and higher. And one of the mistakes I think that we make when we talk about military veterans is we so often, or war veterans for that matter, we so often think of or only talk about male veterans. But the military is not just for men. And I imagine and hope that on this campus are quite a number of women who also served in the military and had their unique experiences both as service members but also as women. In the Marine Corps, we have the lowest number of women serving, about 3%, and in the Air Force and the Navy, we have the highest number of women serving. That's good information to know. Here's some interesting information about what people are saying, what their experience was. 62% of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans think about their war experience at least once a week. The veterans that I talk to think about their war experiences on a daily basis, if not an hourly basis. Many feel that the government, the military, civilians, us, are not doing enough to help veterans. And a huge percentage of those that say that transitioning is somewhat, also say that transitioning is really difficult. The number that I always find the most interesting is that if you talk to veterans, and this has been my experience throughout, if you talk to veterans, even veterans who had really, really traumatic experiences in the military, even veterans who had tremendous trauma, who are suffering, they are missing limbs, they are missing parts of their cognitive ability, aren't functioning anymore, they are struggling in so many ways in their life, maybe their exit from the military was not a good one. And when you ask them if they're proud of their service, they almost entirely say yes. If you ask them if they would do it again, they would almost entirely say yes. Not everyone, but the vast majority of veterans that I talk to. And that can be hard for those of us who didn't serve in the military to kind of wrap our heads around. How is that possible? And it has to do with the feeling that you have of service, the feeling that you have of being part of something that's above you and beyond you and more important than you, that I think many veterans can relate to. What's in a name? Just a little cultural competency for everyone. One of the things we sort of forget about sometimes is that serving in the military is not the same thing, regardless of where you went or what you did. If you are a soldier, you would probably like to be referred to as a soldier. So for example, in my world, I went to the University of Michigan. We're number 3 in the country, by the way, in case anyone's paying attention. I went to the University of Michigan, and I don't really enjoy it when people confuse it with Michigan State, which is a horrible school. Don't ever go there. But that's in a small way, but really, when we're thinking about talking to veterans, at the very least, we should know something about the different services that veterans serve in. Does a veteran who served in the Army like it when you call him or her a Marine? Does a Marine like it when you call him or her a soldier? I would say if you're going to call a Marine a soldier, you should do so from a little bit of a distance, out of arm's reach. But there's an important cultural element here. We're talking a lot about sort of what it means to return to a society that doesn't know much about your military experience or that didn't have those experiences. And I would say, at the very least, and you're going to see how this impacts mental health, so we get into this talk later on, but at the very, very least, I would hope that we would be able to ask folks, where did you serve? Who did you serve with? Were you in the Army? Were you in the Marine Corps? Were you in the Navy? Why? Because it actually matters. The units that you serve with, the places that you go, have different cultures, have different expectations, have different experiences, and we should know something about that. And if you don't know, there's a great opportunity to ask the veteran that you're talking to about that. You were in the Marine Corps. How's that different from the Army? I'll tell you already, the Marine will just say, it's better. Soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, guardsmen. Good things to know. Military culture is a culture of chain of command. It's a culture of rank. What is the advantage of rank? Since most of us out in here in the civilian world don't have much of it. Meaning we don't work that way. We don't think about rank so much. What is the advantage of rank? Somebody shout something out. Sorry? Order.
They have to listen to you.
They have to listen to you. Respect. You don't respect the rank. You don't have to like the person. Respect the rank. Yeah, there's so many advantages to rank that we don't have here. And one of them also is that when you have a rank, it says something about what you've done and what you've accomplished. And what's very difficult for veterans is they leave the military. One of the hardest things that happens to you when you leave the military is that all of this rank that you have accrued, all these accomplishments, all these ways that you have progressed and moved ahead in your life and in your career, reflected in your rank, what happens to that when you take off the uniform? It all disappears. So you're in charge of hundreds of people or 50 people or even 10 people who have to listen to you. And you've earned that. You've been in charge of millions of dollars of equipment. You've earned that. And when you take off your uniform, it all goes away. I laugh about the veteran I talked to who flew jets for the military. And when he was out on leave, how much is a jet? Anyone? How much is it? $100 million? Something? And when he went out on leave, he was too young to rent a car. Happens all the time. Military is an organization of customs and courtesies and respect and ceremony. Our society is becoming less and less like that. We can discuss whether we think that's a good idea or not, but we're becoming less like that. And again, as you become used to an environment that's very much about the way that we relate to each other, the way that we talk to each other, yes sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, saluting, to lose that, to return to a society that doesn't have that can be disorienting. And some of our veterans have trouble with that. Camaraderie is a huge part of the service. A huge part of the service. One of the things that is hard to relate to when you don't actually serve, and by the way, I served a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. I was in the infantry in Israel, so I have some idea of what this is like. But until you have served in the military, you can never really imagine what it feels like to have the kind of camaraderie that you have there. And maybe if you served in sports teams, for example, you might have some inkling of what that's like. But what's amazing about the camaraderie that you have in the military is that you don't have to like the person next to you in order to love the person next to you. That when you serve together, you take care of each other, you protect each other, you look out for each other all the time, at all costs, regardless of whether you actually like each other or would like each other out in the civilian world. But out here in our world, it doesn't work like that. We don't all have people anymore we don't all have people to call at 2 in the morning when we need a ride somewhere. I don't mean Uber, I'm like actual friends. We don't necessarily, when you come to campus, have someone that is willing to help you, not help you, but write notes and copy notes and give those notes to you because you couldn't make it, you were at an appointment. We don't always have someone here out in the civilian world that you know that no matter what time you call them or what you need and when you need it, you don't have to worry about paying it back. You don't have to worry in your mind about, can I really ask this person, and if they do it, what will I need to repay them with in some way? How will I obligate them? All of that is understood. This is a great picture. There's also a concept in the military that I think is hard to find in the civilian world of dedication and perseverance. We don't care what the weather is. You don't care what obstacles are in your way. You will accomplish or make every effort to accomplish the mission that you have, regardless of all those things. And to come out in the civilian world where we are so connected to comfort, so connected to try your best, and if it doesn't work out, that's fine. And I'm not even saying that that's a bad thing, but it's such a different concept of how to relate to work. I see sometimes, I work for the government, right? And I see sometimes we hire folks into our vet center who haven't been out of the military for that long, and it's very hard for them to go home at 4:30 when the office closes. They're not used to time to go home. They're used to completing the mission that they have at hand. Boot camp is the very first place that you learn that. If you've never been to boot camp, you're missing out. One of the main things about boot camp that I think really changes you in a way that I think is so unique to the military and so good for us is the experience of losing yourself into a team, into a group of folks, where the I becomes we, the haircut is the same, the clothes are the same, boots are the same, you all smell bad in the same way, and all of that self-importance goes away. Who here, by the way, has ever experienced an audit at work? We get audits all the time. Somebody comes to our office, they look over our files, we have coffee, we talk about it. Here's what you could do better, they write a report. Here's what an audit, for those of you that don't know, here's what an audit might look like in basic training.
Proper training today. You give the proper training of the day.
First general order, Mr. Grant's first general order is to take charge of the enclosed on government property.
Draw your weapon. Draw your weapon. Proper training. Proper training. Bullets. I'm waiting for this man. First general order. Second order. Now. You give a green. Report. serial number. Weapon serial number.
105-27303.
Scream it out.
Aye, aye,
Weapon.
sir. 105-27303, sir.
Scream it out.
Aye, aye.
Sort of like a pop quiz in your English class, right? It's a really, really different experience. If you've never had it, I recommend you have it. It's pretty cool. Getting out of the military, and this is where we're going to spend the bulk of our time today, can be, or let me actually go back. Coming back from war, coming back from deployment, can be an incredible experience. And these pictures that we have here, anyone been on YouTube or seen any of those reunion videos? Right, I have one that I like to show of a guy, the family's in a lake and this guy's in his scuba gear and he pops up and he says, "I'm home from Afghanistan." If you really want to have a good cry and you don't want to watch the news tonight, go onto YouTube and write return from Afghanistan or return from Iraq or something like that, and you will see some unbelievably heartwarming and amazing reunions. Father surprises son at football game. I think there's one where he parachutes in, right? Really, really cool stuff. And you know, this is an improvement over the experience that our Vietnam veterans had. A huge, huge, huge improvement. But we forget sometimes that this isn't the experience that every veteran had. That for every veteran who had somebody waiting for him or her as they came home, was a veteran who came home from their deployment, took a cab to their apartment that hadn't been occupied in a year or a year and 4 months, dusted off the furniture for a second, went down to 7-Eleven, got himself a hot dog and a six-pack, and went back upstairs and turned on the TV. So not every veteran who has those experiences of going to war has this amazing experience of coming home. For some veterans, home was the very place that you were avoiding when you went into the military. There's a veteran that I met with last week who deployed 4 times and would have frankly kept deploying because his goal was not really to come home. I don't mean he was necessarily trying to get killed. He just didn't have a home to come back to. So he liked deployments and he kept volunteering for them despite what they were doing to him. So we can't forget that veterans have radically different experiences. It's also important to remember, how many of you have seen this picture? That the military is not the same as it was 30 years ago. That our veterans, even though we're not going to spend a lot of time on that today, our veterans are a diverse group of people. Could you imagine this picture 30 years ago? Our veterans are a diverse group of people. The military is a diverse place. There's more than one kind of veteran coming home and more than one kind of experience that they have. Okay, so here are some of the typical transition challenges that veterans have. Now, is this true of every single veteran who goes to war? Is it true of every veteran that comes out of the military? No. I would argue that every single veteran who deploys to a combat zone, regardless of your job, is going to come home and have some of this. Regardless of whether you have PTSD or traumatic brain injury or depression or physical injuries, you're going to experience some of this because the experience of going to war is so radically different from being home that there is an adjustment period that you have to go through. And again, that adjustment period can be a year, or it can be 10 years, or it can be 30 years, depending on how well it's done and how easy it is for you. But the most important one, I think, that comes out is this feeling of separateness. And this is an important thing for us to remember because we're going to talk about PTSD in a minute and the kinds of things that help you recover from PTSD. And feeling separate, feeling disconnected, feeling disengaged when you come out of the military is an incredibly, incredibly common feeling. And why would you feel that way? Well, one of the reasons you would feel that way is that you've just been surrounded by this whole group of people with a common mission. You're all doing the same thing. You're talking the same language. Everything is together. It's all we. And you get out of the military and it goes to I. And you have to learn to live in this environment where no one is paying attention to you, no one is telling you where to be, and you feel different. So many of the veterans that we talked to today, when we have them up on a student panel, and you may remember this from the panel that we did last year, talk about when they come back to school, they feel like they're here with little kids. And I always laugh because the actual probably average age of the student at this school and many other schools is not 17. There are a lot of older students here, just like there are at every other community college. But it's not so much the age that I think the veterans are referring to, it's the experience, it's the worldview, it's the having been out in the world and learned about it and understood it in a different way. And then to come home and be in their feeling, it doesn't mean it's always right, but their feeling being surrounded by folks that can't relate to that. And that feeling of separateness that they report and talk about almost universally is an incredibly lonely experience. And we have to know that. Veterans that come home, our job is to help them reintegrate, be part of the civilian world again, but also to recognize that they don't feel like civilians all the time. They don't always do things the way that we do. We have to help them through that. Managing expectations when you're in the service, especially when you're in a hot, dusty place far from home, maybe a scary place. One of your favorite things to do is to sit and fantasize about what you're going to do when you get out of the military. My fantasy when I was serving was not very creative. My fantasy was I'm going to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken and then I'm going to have a really ice-cold Coca-Cola. I did do that, by the way. Didn't feel great afterwards. But what that also reflects is that sometimes the expectations that you have are either too lofty. I'm going to go and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do all these things. I can't wait to get out. I can't wait to get my degree. I can't wait to do all this stuff. And then you come out and it's not so simple. And it takes longer than you were imagining it was going to take. And you're maybe not quite as good at it or ready for it as you thought that you might be. And sometimes the opposite is true, is that your expectations for coming home were really as simple as Coke and KFC. And once you have that, you look around and you say, now what do I do? Now where do I go? Now what's supposed to happen? And you wait for someone to tell you, be here at 7 tomorrow, at 0700 tomorrow. And you go, okay, I know where to go. But that doesn't happen when you're out of the military. Nobody tells you. Finding employment, letting down your guard, rebuilding community. Huge part of our discussion today is going to be about that. Daily structure and finding excitement. War is hard. War can be bad so many ways, but it's not boring. Or if it is boring, it's followed by not boring. And sometimes it can be hard with all the intensity of serving the military to come back to a civilian world that is not quite as exciting. Your stats class, it might be fascinating, but it's not that exciting. It's hard to get revved up about the world sometimes, and our veterans sometimes need some time to find something new that will give them meaning and some excitement and some of what they've been missing in the past, been missing since the military. And more important is this experience of sort of when you were in the military, you had a mission. You always knew what the mission was. And then you get out of the military and you don't know what it is anymore. Is it to graduate? Is it to get a degree? Is it to get a job? Is it to have a family? And there's no one telling you what the mission is. There's no mission statement. You have to create that. Now that's hard for all of us, I would argue, but it's particularly difficult when you're used to somebody else doing it for you. And when you're used to participating in that mission with a whole group of other folks. Can you guys read this? One of the things that can be tough when you have served in the military, particularly if you've spent time in a war zone, is the experience of coming home and ordering coffee at Starbucks. And particularly what I found, and I was ordering coffee at Starbucks today, and maybe this has happened to other people, but there was a woman in front of me, about 3 people down, that decided that her coffee order should take about half an hour. I think I heard the word frappe or latte or different variations of milk that were half this and half, and that's annoying. But when you serve in the military, it's more than just annoying. And I think the veterans, and this is symbolic of something, the veterans in the room might be able to relate to this. So many of the veterans, they go to Starbucks, and this is symbolic of a larger issue, and they hear somebody talking, I want this, I want this, I want this. My latte wasn't hot enough. I said I wanted 2 shots and not 1 shot. Could you please make another one for me? Or I need this. And when you've served in the military, that kind of entitlement, that kind of I need, I wanted, I asked for, can be hard to be around. Can be hard to get used to. I'd be curious to hear some of the veterans in this room if they've had that experience. One of the other really difficult parts of serving, particularly in a war zone, but also in the military, as we talked about, is how little we know about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And to that end, because we're on a college campus, a quiz. This is your Veterans Day quiz. Can you read the things up there? Is it big enough? How many of you, as you read through this, think that you can answer all 10 of the questions correctly? How many of you think you can do 5? How many of the non-veterans in the room think they can do 5? 1? Why is this relevant? How many of you think you could talk intelligently about the politics that led up to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? Yeah, a lot of us followed that. Who's who, what's what all that politics was about. Why is this important? Nobody can answer these questions. Why is it important? Somebody answer. Yeah, because we're sending folks over there as a country to have those experiences, and when they come home, we know nothing about it. We have the most access to information that anyone has ever had in any war. We have YouTube, we have CNN, we have, I don't know, some other websites. All these ways of learning about what's happening in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and yet very few of us actually know almost anything about it. And so when a veteran comes home and they tell you, I was in Balad, or I was in the Korangal, or I was in Ramadi in 2004, or I was in Mosul in 2006, and they look at the look on our faces because they can tell we have no idea what we're talking about. We don't even know, was Mosul in Iraq or was it in Afghanistan? Oh, I think I heard it on the news. What's going on there? That experience of disconnection plays into some of the mental health problems that some of our veterans have. It plays into that feeling of isolation, of being disconnected, of not being sure who to talk to or what to talk about. And so, I'm going to give you Veterans Day homework. I'm not going to answer these questions for you. And your Veterans Day homework is to find the answers to at least 3 or 4 of these questions. Not right now on your phone, but at some point, go home, talk to a veteran, find out about Mosul. Why is it important now? It's on the news. Why would that matter to someone who served there in Iraq? Find out what the different kinds of discharges are and why they're important and why they might be important to someone who didn't get an honorable discharge. What does that do to you? How does that change you? What is that experience like to have a medical discharge when you were expecting to have a 20-year career in the military? Was the process of the medical discharge different? If it was, why? Was that good? Was it bad? These are the things that make up a veteran's experience, and they can't talk about it with you if you don't have even the smallest fund of knowledge about it. And the good thing is that that information is not hard to find. It's actually really easy to find. One of the things that we find that I think really is about culture too are these different ways that veterans or service members and those of us in the civilian world process the world. When you are in the military, direct communication is more helpful than indirect communication. What is an example of direct communication? An order. Like, go do that. Okay? When you're in the military, your job is to communicate as directly as possible in the most efficient form. Is language and the language that you use relevant? Do you have to speak in a particular way? Or are you allowed to use words that maybe you wouldn't use in the civilian world? Language is not important in the sense that it is out here. Language, the purpose of language in the military is to get something done and to get it done as fast as humanly possible and in the best way. Has anyone, well, I'm sure you have. The other day I got an email from my supervisor. He was expecting me to have sent him something. When he wrote me an email about it, how did he say it? Did he say, where is the goddamn email that I was expecting? No. What did he say? Dear David, I'm confused. I was hoping to have received this thing from you, but I don't see it in my emails. Perhaps I missed it. Please clarify. Your boss. Why does he do that? Why doesn't he just yell at me? Which is, I'm sure, what he wants to do. He doesn't want to offend me. Because in our world, so much of the time, the way that we talk to each other is less about what we actually need to get done and the way that we are going to work together. So much of what we do has to do with process and aesthetics. We talk nicely to each other. We ask nicely. We say please. We say sorry when we don't actually even bump into someone, but someone bumped into us, and we all just say sorry because that's what we say. When you're in the military, that's not how it works. Language is used differently. Authority is considered differently. Here on campus, if you have a difficulty with an instructor, can you go to a dean? The deans are like, no, don't do that. Of course you can. You can always take it up the chain. I mean, you can be told no, but you can always do that. Can you do that in the military? Your sergeant tells you, you say to your sergeant, can I leave early for lunch? And your sergeant says no. Can you go to your officer and say, this sergeant was mean. Can I go early for lunch? Well, you can do it once. You could try that one time and see what happens. So authority is really different in the military. Authority is something that you take seriously. It's rigid. You don't go up the chain. You don't go around. But that's difficult because when you come here, you don't know that you can do that. You don't know that if you have a difficulty with an instructor that you can go talk to somebody. You don't know that if you disagree with the policy sometimes that you can actually say something about it or do something about it and ask for someone to pay attention to you. And the reason that I'm telling you that is sometimes our veterans don't know that they can advocate for themselves in that way. They're not used to having permission to do that. They're used to following the rules. And the rules say, you listen to your boss. Daily structure is high. There are veterans out there, believe it or not, who are 27, 28 years old. They went into the military directly after high school, and at the age of 28 is the very, very first time that they have ever had to manage their own schedule. Think about that. You're 28 or 32, and you've never been grocery shopping. You've gone to the grocery store, but you've never actually been grocery shopping. You've never had to pay rent. You've never had to figure out how to manage your schedule. How do I figure out my classwork, with my homework, with my job, with my family? You never had to do that. Why? Because someone was always doing it for you. And that process of coming into a world, even at an age of 30 years old, where you are a grown-up and never having managed that before, can be tough. One of the things that we see, and you may see on campus too, are veterans who go to school for the first time in 10, 15 years, and what is the very first thing they do? They take 5 or 6 classes. Why do they do that? Because they want to get it done, they want to move, they want to go, there's a mission. And what happens when you take 5 or 6 classes after not being in school for 10, 15 years? We see that all the time. Because the pace of learning is different in the military than it is in the civilian world. It's different from here. When you take a class in the military, how long does a class typically last?
20 minutes.
How many?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Or maybe a week, or maybe 3 weeks. And what do you spend your time doing? All of your time is spent in class. You get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, you stay there until 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, and you learn. They tell you at the beginning, this is what you will accomplish in your learning, and you're going to do it. And then you're done. And you check that off and you move on to the next thing. Oh my God, a semester takes so long compared to that. And a degree, are you kidding me? It takes me 3 years here to go all these classes, or 2 years, and then I have to go to a 4-year, and then I have to go to grad. That is so long. The pace is so different out here. Tied community bonds we talked about. We're going to talk more about. I want to touch on this issue because I think it is really, really, really important. So much is focused for our veterans. I see some chaplains here, which is great. So much of what we focus on at the VA and what we hear about out in the community and in the newspapers and on television, all of which is, it's good that it's out there, but so much of what we hear about are PTSD symptoms and traumatic brain injury and diseases and problems, and all of that is good. We should address that. We should know about it. I'm going to cover it. But for many of our veterans, and I'm thinking of our Vietnam veterans as well as veterans of all eras, more troubling than their symptoms, more troubling than their migraines, more troubling than their sore knees and backs and ankles and necks and the buzzing in their ears are these existential questions. What does it mean to have served in a war? What does it mean to have experienced trauma? What does it mean to have seen parts of the world? I think of it sort of under the rug of the world. To have seen that, participated in it, felt complicit in it. Why did I live through it? Why am I here? Why am I okay? Why am I not okay? What does it mean to have done some of the things that I did? These are very, very difficult issues to process, and I would argue that for many of our veterans, it's exactly these issues that they can bring on campus to their classes, to their clubs, to their groups, to help process some of these topics. Now, yeah, can we do it in therapy? Sure you can. Can you talk about some of this, your survivor guilt in therapy? I hope so. Is that the only place to make sense of what it means to go to war? Absolutely not. It happens in our classrooms. It happens in your speech and debate class, in your history class, in your poli-sci class, in your science classes. All over, we see our veterans trying to process their experiences at school, in the community of school, and to the degree that we can help them do that, that we can be open to their experiences, that we can listen and hear and try to understand, we will be part of helping our veterans understand and process and heal in incredibly meaningful ways. And here's the best part, we, will also gain an understanding. I think about a veteran who talked on a panel once, and he talked about this experience of writing an argumentative essay for his class. And the topic of the essay was to argue for something or against something. That was it. And what he chose to write about, because it was the very thing that he was thinking about all the time, was an experience where he had been, I think, in Iraq, and he had his gun trained on someone, and he chose not to shoot, despite the security risks that this person was posing to their squad. And he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he thought about it, and the argument that he made in his essay was, I should have killed this person. I made a mistake. I should have done this other thing. And he submits the essay to his English instructor, and can you imagine how nervous he might have been to submit that to an English instructor, not having any idea what kind of thoughts and feedback he might get from the instructor, who he imagined might be incredibly offended by what he was suggesting. But this is what troubled him, so he decided to write about it, and he submits this paper, and what he said was, if I had gotten a bad result, not a bad grade, but a bad result, if I had gotten bad comments, if I had had an instructor who didn't understand, I was expecting to leave school. I was going to quit. If I presented this essay and my instructor was unkind or not understanding or not thoughtful, I was going to stop my education, because I can't be in a place that doesn't make any effort to understand me, and I would feel too uncomfortable. But that isn't what happened, thankfully. What happened was the instructor was amazing and impressed and listened and thought about the actual predicament that this veteran had been in and why he was making that argument. And it made all the difference in the world to this veteran. He stayed in school. He kept up with his work. He kept going with his degree because, largely, one instructor paid attention in a certain way. Am I making sense? Okay? This is why what we forget sometimes, we're talking to obviously on Friday is Veterans Day. These are the kind of things that we can pay attention to for our veterans. Being open, thinking about their experiences when they talk about them and what it means for them. Not just what it means in the context of living in this area, but the context of being at war, for example. Let's talk about disabilities for a second. Oh, we're doing great. 43% of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans have VA service-connected disabilities. What is a service-connected disability? Service-connected disability is when you go to the VA and you say, hey guys, while I was in the military, you can also do this while you're still in the military, and you go to the VA and you say, hey guys, while I was in the military, I kind of got PTSD, or I broke my ankle and now I don't walk very well. or a whole host of other things. I got diabetes, for example. And then the government, it's their job or the VA's job to compensate you for that if they think that that's what's happened. Has anyone heard anything about that process? What have you heard? It takes a long time. Sorry, over there? It doesn't work half the time? Yeah, it's a really long and frustrating and difficult and very, very weird process to go through. But what we find is that veterans report, about 43 report disabilities, and look at the number of disabilities that they have. An average of 6 disabilities claimed per veteran. That's a lot, and what's really important about that is we're often talking about veterans in their 20s who went into the military healthy and strong and capable with no disabilities and are leaving the military at 26, 27 with many disabilities. And what's also relevant about that, for those of you who work with disabilities in particular, you know that one of the hardest things to do is get used to a new disability. To see yourself as a disabled person, to see yourself as someone who actually has to struggle with these things because that's the new you. The you that doesn't have a leg, the you that can't concentrate, the you that can't hear the way you used to hear, that you. And the process of kind of coming to an acceptance about that can be very, very stressful and difficult. That new disability. It's true for anyone or many people with new disabilities, but we're talking about, for our veterans, average of 6. It's a lot to process and a lot to go through. Not to mention the stress of actually trying to get service connected through the VA. Here are some of the most common disabilities that are out there. PTSD is on the list, but so is migraines, tinnitus or tinnitus, I never know how to pronounce it, hearing loss, knee problems, arthritis, spine problems, ankle trouble, sleep apnea. It's a good list, right? You start to think about how, if you have 6 of these, it might affect your ability to be successful on campus. It might affect your ability to function in the world. It might affect your ability to be in relationships, to work productively, to think about your goals, to get up in the morning and have energy, with 6 or plus or even 1 disability that's on this list. Here are some of the ways that I think disabilities can impact students. This list is probably much longer. I'd be curious to hear if anyone else has some they want to add. But just getting to and from class can be an experience of pain for a lot of our veterans. Sitting in class with back problems and neck problems and knee problems can be difficult. Hearing, sitting comfortably in lecture, reading for long hours can all be stressful for our veterans. And I say this not to imply that every veteran is struggling with all their disabilities all the time. That's totally not the case. But to be mindful of this group that is on campus and just how frequent it is for them to be dealing with some of these things. Here are the disorders as we think about it for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So this is a study that was done in 2008. I'm going to tell you already, so don't get mad at me. Don't read these numbers literally. There are about 50 studies. Every study is a little bit different. Every study comes at it from a different way. They use a different methodology. They assess in a different way. They talk to different kinds of veterans. They're all a little bit different. But here's the main point. The main point is around 1 in 5 veterans who served overseas, who deployed to a war zone, will experience PTSD and depression. About 1 in 5, plus or minus. About 1 in 5 will have a traumatic brain injury. And when I say traumatic brain injury, I'm thinking about multiple concussions, thinking about NFL players, the kinds of brain injury that they have, all the way up to something much more severe. Those of you who are hopefully better at math than me will have already noticed that 19.5 and 18.5 plus 70 is more than 100. Don't say the number. I won't know if it's right. Is more than 100. And so why? Why is that the case? Yeah, because so many of the veterans that we talk to have PTSD and depression and a brain injury. Because the very thing that caused your brain injury, maybe getting blown up, maybe being in a car accident, may also be responsible for your PTSD. Or maybe you just did 5 tours and you had 7 or 8 things happen to you. But in a way, the most important number that's here is what number? The last number, 70% of veterans, because we're going to talk about PTSD in a second, but 70% of veterans who went to Iraq and Afghanistan don't actually have mental health problems. Do they have readjustment issues? Yes, many. Do they have trouble sometimes fitting in? Yes. Do they feel alienated? Often. But 70% of veterans don't necessarily meet criteria for mental health issue. And it's funny working in this world because when our Vietnam veterans came home, they had to shake people and yell and scream and protest for anyone to pay attention to the fact that there might actually be something wrong. The good news is that today, that's not the case. Today we're aware. We have lectures on it. We go to classes, it's in the paper, it's on the news. But the flip side now has become a problem for some of our veterans, that every time they say something or do something or act in a way that we don't like, some well-meaning or not so well-meaning family member or friend or staff person will wag their finger at them and say, "You have PTSD. You should go to the VA. There's something wrong with you." And one veteran said to me, I think as articulately and eloquently as you can say it, he said, "You know, everybody tells me I have PTSD, but the truth is I don't have PTSD. I'm mostly just an asshole." Veterans are people. Sometimes they're assholes. There could be a joke about the Marine Corps following that, but there won't be. So we have to be careful not to pathologize. Let's talk about PTSD for a minute, for many minutes. What is it? It's so often talked about in a way where people sort of know that it's there, but they're not really sure what it is. It's also overused. Where I live in the East Bay, up north, and in Marin County and in Berkeley, where everything is a trauma and everything is an aggression and everything is a problem, they use the expression PTSD. Oh, so-and-so had PTSD from getting fired. But actually, that's not what PTSD is. PTSD is a stress disorder that occurs following exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. It used to be known as an anxiety disorder, but now it's a stress disorder. What's the difference? Why do we care? Where does anxiety come from? Watching the news. Where does anxiety come from?
Partially from stress.
Partially from stress. Can you be anxious without anything actually happening that's really bad?
Yes.
Yeah, thank goodness, otherwise I wouldn't have a career. That's why pharmaceutical companies make so much money, because you can be anxious for absolutely no reason. Okay? Anxiety comes from within, usually. But where does stress come from? Stress comes from without. Stress comes from the outside world. And why is that important? It's important because when somebody tells you that they have post-traumatic stress disorder, what they are saying is, I have this constellation of symptoms known as PTSD. But what they're also saying is, I had really horrible experiences. I experienced something really terrible that was so terrible that it actually changed my brain. That was so terrible that it actually changed the way I process the world, my ability to sleep, my ability to think clearly sometimes, my ability to see clearly sometimes. That's how terrible this experience was. I'm not just a group of symptoms that fit into the DSM-5. I'm a person who has experienced bad things. And I think about those things a lot. And I wonder about those things a lot. And I'm stuck with those things a lot, even when my symptoms aren't there. And even though I'm going to go over the symptoms of PTSD right now, the main thing that I want you to get out of PTSD is that you only have it if something really bad happened, or many things that were really bad happened. Speaking of which, what are those things? Well, directly experiencing trauma is the most common way to get it. And what are the kinds of things that can happen? Well, being shot at, being blown up, being assaulted, being raped, being in an earthquake or a flood, also produce PTSD, but at a lower rate, much lower rate. The things that cause PTSD are most likely to cause PTSD are what we would call interpersonal. And what is the most interpersonal of all traumas? It's rape. Rates of PTSD from combat are anywhere from 14 to 30%. Our Vietnam veterans have about 30 to 33%, we know, experience PTSD as a result of Vietnam. If you are sexually assaulted or raped as a child, do you know what the rates of PTSD are? Somewhere around 60%. To make life more complicated, are there veterans out there who had childhood trauma, neglect, and abuse, and then also went into the military and experienced trauma and abuse? Yes. Is it everyone? No. But there is a group of veterans out there, out here on this campus, who went into the military partially to escape those traumatic environments, to escape a family that wasn't taking care of them, and they signed up for this whole new family that was going to take care of them, and maybe it did, but also they went to war 5 times, or also they were sexually assaulted, and they're dealing with that. But what about, sorry, I want to go back to this, what about witnessing in person? Can that cause PTSD? Something's not happening to you, but it's happening to someone else? Yeah, it can. I think about a veteran who watched as a whole group of Iraqi soldiers were blown up right in front of his eyes. I won't describe the details of what he saw, but obviously we can imagine some of that. Was he hurt? No. Was he even in danger in that moment? No, not particularly. But the experience of watching the horror stayed with him and stayed with him and stayed with him in the form of PTSD. What about learning that a traumatic event can occur to close friends? That doesn't seem like, well, you're not in danger. That doesn't seem like that might cause PTSD. And yet, I think about the other veteran that I work with, 4 or 5 combat tours in Iraq, all the things you can imagine and a whole host of things that you can't and don't want to imagine. And you know what it was that stuck with him? The thing that woke him up in the middle of the night more than anything else, the nightmares that he had, the flashbacks that he had, was when he was sitting at his mother's kitchen table in suburbia somewhere, on leave from Iraq. He was off for a couple of weeks, so he went home, and he gets a phone call that 6 of his friends have been burned alive in an IED explosion in Iraq. And there's nothing he can do. It's happened already. Right? All he can do is sit at the table and imagine over and over and over again. And what's the key element here? The key element to trauma and PTSD is not the thing that happens, but the helplessness and horror and powerlessness that come with it. And that's why sitting at your kitchen table or your parents' kitchen table and learning about something horrible that just happened to your friends can be traumatic. That's why you get PTSD. It's the helplessness and the horror that are part of it. And that's one of the key elements. It's not just the danger, although that makes it worse, but helplessness and horror that go along with it. I'm thinking about veterans, we're talking about extreme repeated exposure to details. I'm thinking about the veteran that was asked, he was a mechanic somewhere in the Middle East, he wasn't in a combat zone, nobody was trying to kill him, blow him up, do anything. And every once in a while he would be asked to clean out the remains of Humvees that had been exploded in Iraq. Was he ever in danger for 1 minute? No. When his sergeant came to him and said, I need you to do this, did he have the ability to say to his sergeant, I'd rather not? Could you ask someone else, please? I'm super busy drinking my Starbucks coffee. No, of course not. And so every once in a while he would have this experience. And the worst part about it, even worse in a way than the experience, is that he would come home and he started having all these symptoms, and he was drinking and he was shutting himself away from other people, and he wasn't talking and he wasn't smiling, and he was clearly depressed and not functioning well. And what did his family and friends say to him?
Get over it.
But why? Get over it. But why? What did they presume about him? They said, you've never been anywhere. Nothing happened to you. You weren't in the war. You were in Yemen when Yemen was better. You were in these places. You didn't go to Iraq. What are you complaining about? And you know what made it even worse? That's exactly what he said to himself. But if we're going to talk about PTSD, we're going to talk about trauma, we have to include trauma in its widest scale.
Survivor guilt.
Survivor guilt, for sure. We have to think about the effects of sexual assaults. We have to think about the effects of bullying. We have to think about all of those things when we talk about trauma. It's also, interestingly, at the Vet Center we see combat zone veterans and we see military sexual trauma veterans, and there's another group that we're allowed to see too, which is really interesting. I don't know if you have folks here that have done it. We can see drone operators. Why would a drone operator need to come to the Vet Center? They sit in an air-conditioned trailer, playing a remote control video game like thing, and then when they're done, they go home to their kids' soccer practice, or they go play softball with their friends. Where's the problem?
The realization of who they killed. The visualization.
The visualization. And what comes with it? What are the elements of PTSD? Helplessness and horror. And so we're thinking about those veterans too who watch destruction, who are asked sometimes after firing a drone to go in after the drone has exploded and count the bodies and figure out what the damage assessment is. And then they walk out of their air-conditioned trailer and they're out into the world in Virginia or Salt Lake City or Travis Air Force Base up north or wherever it is that they are. Can you imagine how incongruent that is? How disconcerting that is to have that experience and then you're just back to Starbucks. So those veterans are veterans that we see too. If you have PTSD, we'll take like a 2-minute break in a second. If you have PTSD, these are the symptoms that you have. You are going to relive the trauma when you don't want to. Avoid anything that reminds you of it. Be hyper aroused. And we'll talk more about what that is. And as a result, numb and detached. So what I want to do is take a 4-minute break just to stretch, run to the bathroom, get some water, get some delicious fruit, and then we'll finish up. Okay? I want to talk more about, let's get back to the war. I want to talk more about specifically the symptoms of PTSD and kind of what they are and how they show up. Because it's not, again, like when you see people with PTSD in the movies or on TV, there's some things that they show that I think are pretty accurate, and oftentimes the other stuff they show isn't so accurate. So I want to really kind of give us a better sense of what it is. The number one thing in PTSD, remember we talked about PTSD is the experience of trauma. And when you have PTSD, a trauma memory, or the memory of that is sort of responsible for PTSD, it doesn't get filed the same way as a regular memory does. So a regular memory is, let's say for example I asked you, what is the very first car that you drove? When you first learned to drive, the very first car that you drove, who has anything good?
85 Camaro.
There's always one. It's always the Camaros and the Mustangs that speak up. If you can beat a yellow Toyota Corolla station wagon, you're doing better than I was. So I imagine that's pretty much all of you. But okay, so that's a regular memory. That is a long-term memory. Unless you had an 85 Camaro, you probably weren't thinking of it. You probably were, but everyone else, you're not thinking about that car all the time. It's just a memory that you got filed away, and it only comes back up onto the surface of your mind when you see a car like that or somebody asks you. Otherwise, it's filed away, right? A traumatic memory, and particularly a PTSD memory, isn't like that because it doesn't get filed away. And it doesn't get filed away after 1 year, or 5 years, or 20 years, or 50 years in the case of some of our Vietnam veterans, or I can't do the math, but more than that for our World War II veterans, whose flashbacks and nightmares are as powerful today as they were 50, 60, 70 years ago. So a PTSD memory is a memory that is constantly, while you're doing anything, you're in school, you're in class, you're driving, you're playing with your kids, you're talking to your spouse, you're watching TV, annoying, right? Is constantly knocking on the door of your mind. That's a PTSD memory. It's the memory of the very worst things that you've seen, that you've experienced, that you've been a part of, and it's usually the things that you least want to think about. And what would a normal person do, or maybe a helpful person say to you if there was something you were constantly thinking about that you didn't want to think about?
Drink.
Sorry?
Drink.
Drink. That's what I tell my clients. No. Well, you might end up drinking, but what would a helpful person suggest to you? Try not to think about it. Distract yourself. Does it work to do that? Why does it not work? It's a perfectly reasonable suggestion. Try not to think about that. Try to think about happy things. Why does it not work? And I'll give you a clue. It never works. Why?
Because the more you try to not think about it.
Yeah, because the more you try not to think about it, it's actually the act of thinking about it. So you say to yourself, don't think about pink elephants. None of you should think about a pink elephant right now. No matter what you do, do not think about a pink elephant. How many of you just thought of a pink elephant? Those of you who didn't raise your hand, you're all liars. Because you all did. There's no way not to. And so the act of not thinking about it is this act of pushing it away and saying, don't think about it. Ah, crap, I thought about it. And so you're constantly in this push-pull with these terrible memories and thoughts for years and years and years, which is why therapy for PTSD typically involves the exact opposite of that, which is actually deliberately and carefully and thoughtfully over a period of time examining those memories so that eventually they can be filed in the right place. But in addition to memories, if you're able to not have the memories, where do they find you? Would they find you either in your dreams or your nightmares or in flashbacks? The most common are just having intrusive thoughts, which is just a thought that comes to your mind. But flashbacks happen. They're very disturbing. They're very frightening if you don't know what they are. They're very much like hallucinations. You're not actually here, you're there, and they can come on at any time. Well, if you were constantly being triggered or worried about something triggering a memory that you didn't want to have or a thought that you didn't want to have, you might try to avoid all the things that would be responsible for that. The smell of gas, certain kinds of people, certain kinds of places, being in crowds, people of certain ethnicities, certain kinds of foods. What ultimately happens when you avoid all of those things? What is the end result of that? Yeah, so for many of our veterans, the end result of all this avoidance that they do to not get triggered by the world, and I'll tell you there's some other things too, ends up being the experience of incredible isolation. I will tell you without knowing a single one of them that there are veterans on this campus that come to school, they go to class, and the second class is over, they get in the car and they go home, and they don't talk to anyone until tomorrow when they come back and they go to class. Maybe they go to work, and the second work is over, they go home, and they do what they do at home, and they're not going to sometimes go for weeks without having real conversations with people, for weeks without doing something sociable, for weeks without engaging at all. And a lot of that has to do with the avoidance that's related to PTSD. What about hyperarousal? Well, how does hyperarousal work? Okay, you've heard of fight or flight, right? How does fight or flight work? Where is it from? Why do we have it? Yeah, when did we get fight or flight mechanisms? Hopefully 60,000 years ago. You were walking along the savannas of Africa 60,000 years ago, and I used to say a saber-toothed tiger until someone said, well, actually saber-toothed tigers aren't in Africa. So a creature that wants to, that's what happens when you give these talks at colleges. Someone actually knows. So an animal that wants to eat you jumps out, and you run away because you have fight or flight, and your friend doesn't know to do that. And what happens to your friend? Who gets to contribute to the gene pool? Not your friend. Remember the joke, you don't have to run fast, you just have to run faster than your friend. Okay? So, fight or flight is a really good thing to have. If you don't have a good, solid, functioning fight or flight mechanism, you should go to Walmart or Target. You should get one for Christmas. They're really good. They're on, you can get it online now. The problem with their fight or flight mechanism is that when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, that fight or flight mechanism is impaired. And it's impaired in the way that your brain loses the ability to figure out what is an actual threat and what just reminds your brain of a threat. Some of you might think about that old psychology study that they did. It was probably Little Albert, I think his name was. It was really, really probably unethical in the time, where they scared him with they did some kind of scaring with an animal, I think it was, or maybe a man with a beard. Someone remember this? And then later he was scared of anything fuzzy. Yeah, probably not so ethical. And that's what happens to your PTSD brain, is that your brain associates the kitten or the cat with the lion that was going to eat you. And so folks with PTSD are constantly being triggered by things not just that are actually dangerous, but that feel dangerous to that part of their brain. And I'll give you a whole list of that. So I'm thinking about, for example, a woman that I work with had been raped, literally people jumping out of the bushes, had jumped out of the bushes and raped her many, many years ago, and she had terrible PTSD, and she's standing in line at Safeway, and she's next, which is my favorite place, but she's next, and it's not her favorite place because she's kind of trapped in there, people behind her, and the person behind her, and you can see there's a problem here already, the person behind her kind of reaches in and grabs the Justin Bieber, what did the Royals do, what did Trump say weekly, whatever's, you know, the stuff you read at the supermarket and would never get it home, right? And how much would that bother most of us if somebody did that? Would you even notice? I probably wouldn't even notice because I'm reading the magazine. What did Justin do? That's crazy. But what did she do? Someone invaded her space from behind. She didn't see them. Her PTSD kicked in. All of her fight or flight mechanism kicked in. And what did she do? Well, first of all, what did she want to do? Right? Her first reaction was to turn around and fix the problem that way. She didn't do that. What she did instead, she got in her car and she drove home and she locked the doors and she put down the blinds and she closed the curtains and she didn't answer the phone for 3 days. And she didn't go to work, and she didn't go to school, and she didn't go to her midterm, and she didn't answer the door when the FedEx guy came with the Amazon package that she'd been waiting for, and she didn't take out the garbage because taking out the garbage means being exposed, and she doesn't like the look of the guy across the street because he sees her, and that doesn't feel safe, and the person next to her might see her and want to talk to her, and that doesn't feel safe. So she stayed in her house, isolated for 3 days. Why? Because somebody stood too close to her in line at Safeway. And so when we talk about PTSD, we're not just talking about reacting to big triggers like fireworks or cars backfiring or loud noises that are surprising. We're talking about everyday things that happen all the time, and here's a list. Common fight or flight triggers for PTSD. Looking at this list, can you see a way that you could actually leave your house and do anything with your day without experiencing at least one of these? So the experience of post-traumatic stress disorder for many of our veterans, and I should say, really, really actually important, not just veterans with PTSD, but we're talking about veterans today, but obviously other students are going to have PTSD too for all sorts of reasons. But the experience of having PTSD is the experience of constantly, throughout the day, experiencing small to medium triggers. Constantly. By the time they show up in your class, by the time they show up where you are, if it's 5 o'clock in the evening and you're talking to a veteran with PTSD, they may have already been triggered 5, 6, 7, 8 times today. I'm thinking about the staff members. One of the great things about working at the Vet Center is that so many of our employees are veterans, but it also means that many of our employees are veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. We have learned that when I go into somebody's office, I don't knock on the door when they can't see me because I'll get and that'll last about half an hour to 40 minutes for them because they get this incredible dose of adrenaline. And so what I've learned to do is as I'm walking down the hallway, I'll sort of scratch, you can't hear it, but I'll kind of scratch the wall or tap the wall on my way so that they can hear me coming. Because the experience of PTSD is the experience of getting triggered all the time by small things. And that's something that I think for those of us that don't have it, we just don't know. We don't know what it's going to be. I have a good example here. I'm going to do this one. I'll come back to the other one. This is, I think, a really good video showing the kinds of ways that you can experience PTSD symptoms on campus and what happens.
Empirical formulas using mass of each element.
Conversion factors make use of the relationship between two units of quantities expressed in fractional form.
Guys, let's focus.
All right, fine. Quiz time, huh?
Great.
All right. Single cell organisms break down organic molecules through
Metabolism.
The core of the hemoglobin molecule is
Iron.
Macromolecules are ozone is bonded by what?
Emma, have a gun, X-ray 1.
This isn't happening. This isn't happening.
And hang on, where you guys at?
7 hold, correct that X-ray 1, 2 hold, show them the beam attack.
Roger that.
We're just entering base trying to find the beam attack.
We will fight our country's battles in the air and then the sea.
With atoms, ions, and molecules and strong.
You know this one, man. Brandon. Brandon.
Guys.
Good. Hey, you want to talk about this? We're home now.
Brandon, you okay?
It's just, sometimes just little things, they just send you back, and I'm just trying to work through it still.
Seem like a typical sort of thing that might happen? I think it's a really typical thing. I think this is the kind of thing that happens to our veterans with PTSD on a daily basis on campus. What were the triggers? What were those terrible triggers that were so frightening?
Sunglasses.
Sunglasses, what else?
The eating of the,
Licorice, red vines,
the walkie-talkie or whatever the janitor.
the walkie-talkie.
The person getting close to his face.
Those are the triggers. Benign, right? There's nothing in there that you would say, if you saw it, that should be a trigger for someone who went to war. And yet for him, it was enough, and it could have frankly just been any one of those. It could have just been the red vines. It was enough to send him back to a place and to leave him incredibly unnerved. What did his friend do that was so good? This is, by the way, what an amazing intervention looks like. What does his friend do?
We're home now.
Yeah, he just grounds him. He just brings him back to where we are now. Does he give him a big hug? Does he get in his space? Does he ask him all sorts of questions? No. He just looks him in the eye. He says, we're home. He grounds him. He lets him know that he's there for him. He lets him know that he cares about him. And then he allows him some space to come back. It's an amazing, amazing interaction. How realistic is it? We can only hope. What I would suggest to you is that when those things happen, oftentimes, the only one thing about this video that I'm not going to say I don't like, but I would sort of caution us against is the vast majority of times when a veteran gets triggered like that, they're gone. That's it. They're gone for the day. They don't come back that day. And so the intervention that you saw here on the video is what an intervention should look like, except it might be on the phone, it might be an email, it might be checking in with a veteran the next time you see them on campus to make sure that they come back, to make sure they know they didn't freak anyone out, they didn't embarrass themselves, they didn't make anyone uncomfortable, it's okay. So many veterans I've talked to have had experiences in class where something triggered them, something even oftentimes that they don't know what the trigger is, but suddenly they're triggered and they get up and they walk out and they're so embarrassed that they don't come back. And the way that they need to come back is for an instructor or a friend or someone who saw what happened to reach out and tell them to come back, to reach out and say, you're okay, you're home, we get it. Come back to class, come back to this group, come back to this team, whatever it is. That's what's so great about this interaction to me, but it's hard to do. I want to show you another email about a gentleman with PTSD. This is a guy that I actually met last year. I think since I was here, I had the distinct pleasure of getting to go for a week to Ireland to play golf with disabled veterans. It's tough work. And I got to go again this year too, which is pretty cool. Everyone thinks it's awesome except my wife. And I got to know him, this gentleman that you're going to see today. He's a good golfer, really, really nice guy, but really struggles with PTSD. And I think you'll have a really, really good sense of it from this video. Just as a warning, there is a moment where something blows up right at the beginning. You're going to hear about it. You're not really going to see anything too terrible. Okay? But just to let everybody know, that's what's about to happen. Sorry.
one of the guys looks over at our interpreter and goes, "I hope you said goodbye to your mom because we're going to get blown the fuck up today." I knew right then and there it was going to be a bad day.
You okay? Yeah, you okay? Yeah. You okay? Okay, Parker's looking a little hurt back here. Parker's conscious, but he's not responding.
The stuff these guys have gone through, they're going to go through their whole life. It's never going to be gone.
Ryan Fleming, age 30, was a sergeant in the Army National Guard, team leader, squad leader. Like I already knew what I was going to do. I already knew at some point I was going to join the military. You know, I told her, you know, I'm in an infantry company. You know, if you can't handle the chance of me not coming home, then don't, like, let's not do this.
We'll split up, and if you come home and we want to get back together, then... But I didn't want that.
She was like, nope, we're going to do it. We're going to stick it out. And she goes, and I want to marry you.
I knew what I had, and I didn't want to lose it.
It smelled funny. It looked weird. You know, I didn't see any trees that I saw at home. I didn't see any animals I saw at home. And right then and there, I knew that I was in a totally different world.
Is this foot all right? Sailor? Is this foot okay? Is it together? Yes, it's together.
There's always a trigger man. There's always someone connecting a battery or hitting send on a fucking cell phone. There's always somebody there.
Where is he? Where the fuck's he at?
If it was more than a couple of days, I knew something went down.
I've got the gunner telling me he sees the trigger man. So I'm trying to get eyes on.
Hey, everyone look to the 9 o'clock. My gunner says you identified a trigger man running through the wood line.
I see this guy in the wood line just crouching down. And I'm thinking, this is the only fucking asshole that didn't run away from this situation. Like, he's either filming us or that's the trigger man.
Let me light his ass up. Scotty, we don't know if it's a civilian or who it is. Why the fuck would he be there watching me, Salvation? Look at all the fuckers watching.
It's not fair. We had our fucking hands tied.
He's a lot distant now. Not intentionally. It's just, you know, he goes in his own...
Just seeing how much they miss me. And I honestly felt like I didn't miss them. Like, I didn't feel that. I knew I missed them. I gave them a hug because that's what you're supposed to do. But there was no connection there, you know? It was gone. It still is, man.
But they don't come home the same. I love him no matter what. I'm going to work through it.
The most helpful person coming home and still to this day is my wife. She's the only thing that's kept me together. She understands, she gets it, she doesn't use it against me. She's that glue to this family, you know?
I've been told, why do you put up with it? You know, you can see it in his eyes. It's not him. And that's just why. I know it's not him. You know, I know it's the PTSD. It's not him.
Why can't I sleep? Well, here, take a sleeping pill. Why am I freaking out every time a fucking dump truck drives by me? Well, here's a pill. Take this and it'll be okay. And I did that, and it fucked me up worse. I started fucking closing down the hatch, even tighter, you know? No, even less connection with the kids and my family.
Why doesn't Daddy smile? Why isn't Daddy happy anymore? How do you explain that to a 7 and 8-year-old?
But something in my head said, you're better than this, you're stronger than this, you're not going to be that guy, you're not going to be a statistic. You're not going to fucking keep swallowing these pills until you blow your fucking brains out. I'm not going to be that guy. I can't do that to my kids. I can't. I dropped everything. I detoxed off of the 2 hardest fucking drugs you can possibly detox off. Opiates and Xanax. And after I did that, my life turned around. Instead of going, when the fuck is this barbecue gonna end? I was actually talking to my family again. I was actually getting up, playing with the kids, hugging my wife, you know, the simple shit, like that I didn't do before. And just staying active with other veterans, man, like being around other guys. Shit comes up, we talk, we vent, or we don't. You know, it's awesome. For guys that don't have that, it's a tough road. It's a really tough road.
It's a powerful video, right? Yeah. I've seen it 50 times, and every time I get emotional about it. So he's a pretty typical guy when I think about combat veterans. He's experienced, the things that he struggles with are pretty typical. That's often what it looks like. What did you notice about him? What did you notice about his situation in terms of what we've already talked about?
He's lucky he has a family.
Yeah, good family, great wife, very, very supportive. What else? Yeah, does very well with what helps him. His wife, support from other veterans. What else did you notice about him? Does he seem relaxed?
He's better than he was when he first got.
He is. What else? What caught your attention about him?
He's brave. He talks off the drugs.
Yeah. He's intense too, right? Really, really intense, yeah.
Why are they prescribing opiates to PTS?
The opiates were for the pain. Right, so what does he say in the beginning of the video? It gets blown up. Is this ankle okay? Did anyone notice how he responds to having his ankle blown up? What is his first response? What would most of us do? Sorry? Yeah, what do most of us do? Something terrible happens, so you get some kind of serious injury. What is the first thing that most of us would do? I'll give you a clue. Attend to the injury. Stop what you're doing and attend to the injury, but he doesn't do that. He just wants to know, matter of fact, if his foot is still attached to his leg, and once he knows that it's attached to his leg, he goes back to doing the job. That's amazing. That's not how most of us function, but that's the way that he's been trained. He's been trained to sort of ignore his pain. He's been trained to not pay attention to his pain and go to the mission at hand. The problem is that he comes home and he can't ignore it because it's getting in the way of too much stuff. So he tries to push it away with Xanax. He uses the pain pills that he's getting from the VA for his ankle. He uses that to also disconnect. And then he does something incredibly extraordinary. And I cannot tell you how many veterans I've seen do this, except to say that it's very few. He actually, by himself, for the most part, detoxes off of all those meds. That's amazing. And for every one of Ryan Scott Flemings that are out there, are 5 or 6 or 10 who don't have the kind of family support that he has, who don't have whatever the willpower he needed to do that, who don't have the wherewithal to process all of that, who are out there struggling, dealing with their medications, dealing with their pain, dealing with their PTSD, with nobody there to help them. What did you notice about his language? Expressive? It was really funny, by the way, when we went to Ireland last year, we went to all these posh golf resorts in Ireland, and they're very traditional, and there's this group of 12 combat veterans just swearing left and right. I think they probably offended just about everyone, but I thought it was pretty cool. But I want to tell you an experience that I had with him because it applies to something they could easily have on campus. We were golfing, and it was the last day of golfing. We'd had this amazing trip. The sun was shining, green, 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 and we're playing golf in Ireland, and it's all paid for, and there's really nothing wrong. I mean, really, nothing wrong. And we're going, and the group organizer, who's the one who set this whole trip up, and everyone is super thankful for what he's done, and he's the nicest guy, just very, very mild-mannered guy. And he comes to us as he's going around to all the other groups that are playing, and he comes and he goes, guys, you need to go faster. You need to move faster. We were going slow because I'm terrible. And every like 20 yards I have to walk, hit the ball, go 20 yards. And he comes to us and he goes, come on, guys, you need to go faster. We need to move faster. Just a little bit of that pressure. And you know what Ryan said to me? He turns to me and he goes, if that motherfucker talks to me one more time, I'm going to beat his fucking face. Now, if you didn't know better, you might actually take him seriously and think he was going to do that. You might think, whoa, what is wrong with this guy? I mean, all Roger, the organizer, all he did was tell us to play faster. We probably should play faster. But for him, who struggles with PTSD, just that pressure, somebody using that tone, a little bit of pressure, a little bit of force, a little bit of something, caught him off guard, and off he went to the races. And he needed 20 minutes to settle down. And if he'd been in a classroom setting, or if he'd been in a setting with people who didn't understand, who didn't know what it was that was happening to him, can you imagine what the response might have been to him blurting something out like that? That's what we talk about sometimes when I talk about language too. I want to tell you a story about something that happened right here in this room last year. Do you remember you had, oh, and why can't I remember his name, but the Yellow Birds, the gentleman who wrote that? Did anybody? Kevin Powers, thank you. And he came to this campus, and I got to speak before him. And he came to this campus, and there was a group who came to my presentation who were really on campus because they wanted to hear him. And they were a book club, and they were talking about the book. Who here has read it, by the way? If you haven't read it, and you're going to read a book about the war in Iraq or Afghanistan, I would definitely, you would not go wrong reading that. It's, in my opinion, one of the very, very best books that are out there. Really beautifully written, but also it's kind of a brutal book. And so this group of folks is sitting around and they've read this book for book club. And I hear them talking. And one of them says, you know, I thought this was just a wonderful book, but I did not care for the language. And they all nodded, yes, why did he have to use so many bad words? And I remember thinking, seriously, it happened right there. And I remember thinking to myself, if the thing that offends you about this war, if the thing that offends you about all of the violence and grossness and bloodshed and harm and destruction, if the thing that offends you is the language, you may be missing the point. And I think that that's something that sometimes our veterans struggle with, even the ones that don't have PTSD, is that sometimes they get caught up in the language, and the response that we give them is, you can't talk like that. And you probably shouldn't, but you can't talk like that, and we forget what's actually motivating the language, which is something that is really bothering them. And they end up having the wrong conversation. The conversation becomes about their anger and not about the thing that's a problem. And so I would say, when it comes to language, for example, on the one hand, and not just language, but on the one hand, veterans are here on campus. It's a college campus. You can't just say anything all the time. You're not running for president. You can't just say anything all the time. So on the one hand, it actually is helpful sometimes to let veterans know, like, listen, this is where you're at. You can't, there's things you probably, ways of speaking you probably shouldn't do. But on the other hand, not to just take a step back and realize where this is coming from. And think about the culture that the veterans are coming from, and why they might be talking that way, and what might be going on there. And I guess to be a little bit less offended is sort of what I'm saying. And I'm not suggesting that everything is okay. It isn't. But that's one way to think about it. What's also interesting about Ryan is the way that he ended up getting help, and this applies to something in terms of the way that we all deal with veterans. So how does Ryan get help? He's struggling, he comes home, just the way that he tells you. His marriage is rocky, his kids don't talk to him because they're scared of him, he's on all these pills, he's struggling. And does he go to the VA? No, he does not. Why? Because he's tough, because he's a combat veteran, because he just heard bad things about the VA, because going to the VA means talking to someone, which he doesn't want to do. So he doesn't do any of the things that you would want to do in order to get better. And he won't go, and he won't go, and he won't go until one day his sergeant shows up at his door and he says to him, we're going to go to the hospital right now. I heard you were doing bad. Get in my car, we're going to go to the VA. And he says, no, I don't want to go to the VA. And the sergeant says, I think you misunderstood me. Either I'm going to drag you into my car and throw you in the trunk and take you to the VA, or you're going to walk to my car and get in the front seat and go to the VA. He said a little bit more colorfully than that, but one way or another, you're going to go to the VA. And that's even though ultimately maybe the medications weren't helpful to him, that's at least got him started onto the road to recovery. And I tell you this story because one of the difficulties that every college campus has and every therapist that works with veterans has is how to get veterans who need the help to actually get the help. How to get them their accommodations for disabilities, how to get them to go to treatment, how to get them to take care of themselves in the way for the services that are available. And one of the mistakes that I think that we make is that we are sometimes too gentle and too careful and too formal and too worried, too much on eggshells. And sometimes the way that our veterans respond, and I'm not suggesting this works always, but sometimes the way that our veterans need to hear from us is us jumping into the ring with them and saying, I'm not going to just say to you, have you considered treatment? But to say, this is what you're going to do. You're going to get in your car and you're going to make an appointment and you're going to go to this place at this time, and I called them and they are expecting you and I expect you to go. And I'm going to call you and check on you and make sure that you went. Does that always work? No, but it works better. Sometimes we have to not be afraid to jump in and wrestle with our veterans a little bit to get them to the help that they need. You don't want an accommodation? Of course you don't want an accommodation. Do you want a disability? You don't want to have a disability? Of course you don't want to have a disability, but you have one. What are we going to do? Here's what we're going to do. Sometimes that kind of, I don't want to use the word forcefulness, but assertiveness is the very thing that we need to do to help folks who are struggling to give themselves permission to do what they need to do to get help. Lots of ways that PTSD can affect student performance. Lots and lots of ways, but here are some of them. Short-term memory, concentration, difficulty managing relationships sometimes. Pressure of time tests is a huge one. If you're looking for one accommodation that I would say universally helps students with PTSD, regardless veterans or not veterans, more time on tests or taking time off completely for tests. Huge, huge, huge. Once that time pressure, remember the golf story? Once that time pressure is removed, can all relax a little bit. Large classrooms can be triggering. Taking classes during time in school when it's really, really crowded can be triggering. Group work can be triggering or difficult to manage, all with PTSD. We can't talk about veterans, before Veterans Day, we can't talk about PTSD if we don't talk about suicide. We know that suicide, actually just got off a call from my office. We had a conference call with all the vet centers in the western region of the United States, and in the first month of the year, we've already had 6 suicides out of our veteran population, including one director of a vet center who was a veteran. We know that suicide is an epidemic. It is a crisis in our veteran community, and unfortunately, we have to pay attention to it. Unfortunately, it's there to the degree that we have to pay attention to it. And we know that Veteran VA is reporting about 20 suicides a day. That number was lower, and then it was higher. It was at 22. Now it's at 20. And we have to pay attention to suicide. We know our female veterans, our women veterans are more likely to commit suicide than their peers. We know that our younger veterans, 18 to 39 in particular, are extremely vulnerable to suicide compared to their non-veteran peers. And so what do you do? Like, how do you, if you're not a mental health expert, you're not a therapist, how do you know? How do you assess? What do you do? Well, number one, what I would say is you pay attention to warning signs. You start noticing when behavior changes, when the person that always came to class and was sitting in front and taking notes rarely comes to class or is periodically coming to class, and they look like they haven't taken care of themselves in the way that they used to, and they're not asking questions, and they're not doing well in their papers, or they're not coming to that club anymore that they were a part of. And you start noticing an accumulation of warning signs. Should you be nervous? Yeah, you should be concerned. Now, what does it mean to be concerned? Does it mean freaking out and trying to call the campus police immediately and, oh my God, this veteran's going to commit suicide? No, I don't recommend that. What I do recommend is taking it seriously and approaching the veteran and offering the number one most effective intervention for suicide that exists today. Anyone know what it is? It is the most uncomfortable sentence you can ask. Are you thinking of hurting or killing yourself? I'm worried about you. I ask that question all the time, sometimes every day. and I hate asking it. I always feel like I have to apologize when it's such an awkward thing to ask someone. Are you thinking of hurting or killing yourself? And yet, you gotta ask it anyway. Why? Because sometimes, the answer will be yes. And oftentimes when the answer is yes, someone has been waiting for someone to just ask them that question. Please ask me that question so that you can help me get help. Why hasn't anyone noticed what I'm looking like, what I'm doing, what I'm behaving? Somebody please notice. So ask the question. Get over being uncomfortable. What is the very worst thing that will happen if you ask the question? Someone will be a little bit offended. Why would you think that about me? I don't think it about you. I just have to ask. Ask the question. Okay? I want to touch a little bit on traumatic brain injury. TBI we think of as one of the sort of signature wounds of this war. And why is that? What is the most common way that we know, or one of the most common ways that we know that veterans who went to war get injured? By blasts. Now the worst part about TBI, these are some of the consequences of TBI, of traumatic brain injury, but the worst part about it is, for a lot of veterans that have it, they don't know that they have it. How can you not know that you have a traumatic brain injury? How would you not remember that something really bad happened to you and you would have a traumatic brain injury? Because oftentimes the bad thing that happened to you was much worse for someone else. Someone got caught in the blast, you just got caught in the blast wave, and you banged your head, or you got thrown out of a vehicle. And when you came to, or when you just pulled yourself up, you had a headache and you felt like you wanted to throw up, or maybe you didn't. And then what did you do typically in that scenario? Do you go to sick call? Do you ask to go on leave for a week? You do nothing. You ask your friend who has that huge Advil supply that they got shipped to them from home, and you chew on Advil for the next week or so, and then you sort of forget about it until 6, 7, 8, 10 years later you're in class and you've just read the same paragraph 47 times and you don't understand a word, and you studied for hours for your econ test and you got a 23%. And then you start to wonder, why am I doing so badly in school? And why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all because that's a good time for an intervention. Don't assume that the veterans that you're working with know about their disabilities or know what they mean. Oftentimes veterans, even veterans who have been service-connected, the VA's told them they applied for PTSD or TBI or something else, particularly mental health related, and they know, oh, I'm 70% for PTSD. And you say, well, tell me, what is PTSD? I don't know. They just know they have it. They know it's a problem, but they actually don't know how it impairs them. And so sometimes they need us to help them figure that out. And when I say us, I don't just mean therapists and psychologists and clinicians, I mean all of us. I mean instructors, I mean DSPS folks, I mean counselors, I even mean admissions folks. Everybody can say, hey, have you been assessed for this? Did you have these experiences? If you had them, did anyone check to see if you had TBI? If you're struggling, here's a video.
I feel sad every
Sure.
time that I look myself in the mirror, and I look perfectly competent, and I am not. And that's why I don't like to look myself in the mirror. I just wish I could continue serving my country, but I can't. I don't remember how I got injured. I just have the facts. I was in a convoy and it was a head-on collision. Don't having the memory of what happened is a struggle. But what I have is records and people telling me, you were in an accident in Iraq, you were in an accident in Iraq. So eventually, of course, when people ask me, I automatically answer, I was in an accident in Iraq.
On the other hand, I'm glad it's over. With my self-esteem being down, I was at a party one time.
It was like a bar grill type atmosphere. I was talking to a young lady at that time. So we were having a great conversation, and I was sweating bullets, because at that time, my stuttering was so bad. And then her friend comes along, I guess she was a little bit drunk. And I'm never gonna forget this. She said, she sat down right next to her friend. She said, "Why are you talking to this guy? Why are you talking to a slow guy? He's kind of slow." So as soon as she said that, of course, it just put everything to a halt. I got up, I just said, it's nice meeting you. I've been in the civilian world, going about maybe almost 4 weeks now. I've been, to look for a job, I've been searching online, calling job ads. To be honest with you, it's tough.
It's also the way that a lot of veterans end up in a community college, right? They start looking for work when they get out. Work is or isn't available. They realize they need a college degree, which is a good thing. They also realize that if you can use your GI Bill, not only will school be paid for, but you also get a housing allowance. So if you don't have a job and you go to school, you can actually live now that you don't have any salary from the military. So a lot of veterans, like this gentleman, either with TBI or even without, who end up in school exactly in this scenario. And they're still trying to work it out, or they're trying to work out what their disability is about and how does it impact them. We talked about this. Before we get into very specific recommendations, I want to talk about social support, because that's really what we're here for. Social support is the perception and actuality that one is cared for and has assistance available from other people, and that one is part of a supportive social network. It turns out in the literature, and there's a lot of it, that guess what? We do way better when we have social support. We are much less symptomatic when we have social support. When we have social support available to us, we withstand trauma better. We're actually less likely to get PTSD when you have social support. You are more likely to recover, and more likely to recover faster and be more functional, and less likely to experience depression, and less likely to be suicidal, and even your pain can go down when you are provided with or part of significant amounts of social support. It's so good for us to have it, and can be so hard to get it. And so I want to say, by the way, this is social support, in case you missed the definition. I've been wanting to get pandas in here, and I finally did. So what are opportunities for social support on campus? How can we provide that to our veterans? What does it look like? Any thoughts? Well, I'll offer some ideas for you. Social support isn't just about hugging a veteran. It's about making an extra phone call. It's about walking a veteran from one place to the next so you know they don't get lost, and you know they don't accidentally go back to their car and go home. It's about sitting down with a veteran and noticing that they're struggling with something and spending the extra 5 minutes or 10 minutes or half an hour to walk them through it. It's about filling out the form with the veteran so that they're not overwhelmed by the 400,000 forms they have to fill out with college and GI Bill and VA and student loans and all the other stuff that they have to deal with. And they get this pile of forms, and the person says, "Hey, fill these out and then bring them back to me when you're done, and I'll do this magical thing for you." So social support is, why don't you come in tomorrow at 9 o'clock, I'll have a few minutes and we can fill out these forms together to make sure that they're taken care of. Social support is saying, oh, in order for you to get accommodations, you need a letter from your VA provider, but you don't actually remember that person's name, so why don't you sign this release so I can call the VA for you and I can talk to your clinician for you so that you don't have to try and get discouraged and stop and not do this thing because it's too much for you. Social support is inviting a veteran to join the softball club, inviting them to go to an activity that they might not otherwise go to. Social support is asking them about their experiences. It's about making that tiny or even large effort, but it doesn't have to be large, that says, I recognize that you're a veteran and I will take care of this for you. I will advocate for you. It is, if you haven't done it, let me tell you, it is my absolute favorite part of the job that I have. I love doing therapy and I love doing counseling, but I love making phone calls and writing letters for veterans. It's so fun because you feel like there's an actual accomplishment in the end. I also love calling the military and yelling at them for veterans. What do you mean he's still going to deploy? That's super fun for me because I wasn't used to yelling at officers and now I get to. But that is what social support looks like on a community college campus. It's, I noticed that you were in class and then you weren't. Where are you? Are you okay? Sending an email. Hey, did you know that this thing is happening on campus? Why don't you come with me? That's what social support looks like. And I want to encourage you all to not underestimate the incredible power that you have and opportunities that you have to provide that to veterans on campus and to make the difference between their success on campus and failure on campus in some cases, to make the difference between their ability to heal and recover and process and do well and be part of the community or not. And if everyone puts in an extra minute or an extra 5 minutes or an extra 10 minutes once in a while, veterans will do better. And I think they've earned it. And I tell people this because sometimes we feel like you watch the presentation, you see all of this stuff that they deal with, and you think, what am I going to do? I have this other job, and what can I do? And I would say what you can do is take a couple minutes. Come to a lecture, for example. Veterans Day is on Friday. Instead of walking around saying thank you to veterans, although you can do that, go rent a movie, like a real one, not a silly one. Go read a book. Go read a magazine article. Learn about the experiences that veterans have or what they did have. Reach out to the veterans in your community. The effect that it will have will be tremendous. Don't underestimate it. I want to finish with a couple of thoughts. We talked a little bit about this, but I want to review it. Veterans with service connections and disabilities don't always know what to do about those disabilities. They don't know how to get assessed for them. They don't know what the assessments mean. That, I always think, whenever I'm on a community college campus, that is often the hugest gap between what you have here and what we can offer at the VA, is that sometimes no one is actually sitting with them and helping them work out what does it mean to have this disability and how are we going to help you through this. Warm handoffs. I can't say enough about this. Obviously, it's true for everyone, but particularly for our veterans who are struggling to feel connected, not every veteran, but many, who are struggling to feel connected, who are struggling to feel a part of a community that's no longer their military community. What they need is warm handoffs. Don't just send them to the vet center. Send them to the vet center and have somebody waiting for them. Don't just send them to the financial aid person who knows exactly how to help them. Call that person. Walk the veteran over there, call the person, say, I'm sending a veteran to you right now. His name is Bill or her name is Susan or whatever. Please, this is what needs to happen. Those warm handoffs make a huge, huge, huge difference. We've started a program now where we work with the larger VA, and when we send a veteran over there, I always have somebody waiting for them, always. And what we found is that when we do that, guess what? People actually take the services that are offered to them. And when I call them and when I tell the veteran, hey, listen, go to this address and they'll take care of you, 5 times out of 10 it doesn't happen. Not because the service isn't there, but because the veteran feels lost and they feel disconnected. If a veteran needs but doesn't want to participate in accommodations that are available to them, don't be discouraged. Sometimes, just like advertising, you need to hear it 6 times or 10 times or 15 times. Don't be discouraged that someone didn't listen. I mean, even for me, I get discouraged sometimes, but I have to remind myself, it's okay. Sometimes they need to hear it from a bunch of different people at a bunch of different times. And of course, we're all like that. In the classroom, I tell instructors, and hopefully if you're not an instructor, you can tell instructors, be in charge of your classroom. Because when you're not in charge of your classroom, there are students who can't learn, and you don't want your veterans to be the ones to feel like they need to be in charge of your classroom. How many of you have been in a class where a veteran has told someone to shush? Okay? I've talked to veterans all the time. They feel like they have to actually take control of the class in order for them to learn. It's not fair. I tell instructors, make sure to do it. Don't make the veteran do it. Consider alternate assignments when there's possibility of doing that. You can't do that for everything, but if you're in an English class and you assign a Hemingway novel about World War I, The Sun Also Rises, and the veteran tells you, I don't like this assignment, it's very hard for me, consider something else when you can. Allow veterans, and maybe everyone in your class, to sit where they need to sit. Be aware that if you have PTSD, and again, not just veterans have PTSD, sitting in the middle, sitting in the front, sitting in the back, it matters to comfort. And if you are a veteran that has PTSD, you may not want to sit right there because you can't get out and you can't see the people behind you. You may need to sit in the back, or you may need to sit in front. Allow veterans to do that. Consider reducing the requirement of group work. Oftentimes in classes we do group assignments when we don't have to. There are times that veterans find that very, very difficult. I would suggest not making that a requirement. Choose your words carefully. When it comes even to the election, but particularly when we're talking about anything related to the war. This is a college campus. We have to talk about current events. We have to talk about things related to the war. That's part of what learning is about. I'm not saying not to do it. What I'm saying is remember that when you talk about the war, there are people in your classrooms or at lectures or on campus whose understanding of the war is very, very, very personal. And I'm not just talking about veterans. I'm talking about dependents of veterans. I'm talking about survivors or surviving spouses or family members, fathers who were killed or injured, brothers, sisters, the whole thing. Remember that those folks are in your classroom, and to just be thoughtful and careful about what you talk about. And that's true not just in classrooms, but all throughout campus. That when we're talking about the war, we have to be really, really thoughtful of the folks who actually went and had those experiences. Even if you disagree with each other, remember that their experience of it will be different than yours. Very, very, very important. And the final one. Oh, we're over time. I'm really sorry. The final thing. Veterans Day is coming up on Friday. The most important thing that we can do for our veterans is let them know that we have their backs. Right? If you need something, I will help you. If you fall, I will catch you. If you're not sure how to do that, come talk to me. I'll tell you. And the last thought. Then everyone can go. We talk a lot about saying thank you for your service, and some of you may have heard me talk about this before. We talk a lot about saying thank you for your service, and many of the veterans that I've talked to have kind of ambivalent feelings about that. And the reason they have ambivalent feelings about people saying thank you for your service is that sometimes it feels when we say that like the person at Walmart, the Walmart greeter who's saying, have a nice day. Or when you're going through the drive-thru, enjoy your meal, have a nice day. Thank you for your service. And so for some veterans, they're not sure how to take that. And one of the reasons they're not sure how to take it is sometimes we're not quite sure what we're saying thank you for. What if you didn't think the war was a good idea? What if you don't support it? What if you're not sure what the veteran did or how they felt about it? I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying there are veterans that don't always know what to do with that. But if you are going to say thank you to a veteran, I want to give you something to say thank you for. One thing to be thinking about maybe when you say it, because we don't know, when talking to a veteran, you don't know what they did always. But here's what we do know. We know that one of the most American values that we have, as far as I understand it, is the value of choice. You can choose where you live, you can choose what kind of career you're going to be a part of, you can choose what kind of coffee you want, you can choose what kind of cereal you want to eat, you can choose, you can choose, you can choose, you can choose. Our society is based on the ability to choose in many ways. And ironically, when you sign up for the all-volunteer United States military, in an act of patriotism, what is the very first thing that you abdicate? Choice. Once you sign up for the military, you no longer are responsible for where you go and what you do. You know who's responsible? We are, with how we vote. And so the very act of signing up for the military is to say yes before you know the answer to the question. To be willing to go where you're sent and do what you're asked to do, whether it's going to war or not going to war, whether it's working in an office or on a battlefield. The act of service to our country is the act of saying yes. The act of being willing to not have choice about what it is that you do and how you do it, as that's the sacrifice that we talk about when we talk about serving the military. And I would argue that in order for a society to function well, it is important and crucial that there are people who are willing to say yes. There are people who are willing to abdicate that choice for the greater good. And it's for that, not necessarily for what a veteran might or might not have done, but for that, the willingness to go where we ask them to go and do what we ask them to do, that I think we can say thank you. And with that, thank you all very much for having me today. Guys, thank you very much for inviting me. It is such a pleasure to be on this campus every time I get to be here. Thank you all for spending time in your afternoon hearing about veterans issues. That's how to contact me. Any questions, problems, issues, consults, let me know. I'm happy to talk to folks. But thank you guys once again.
Don't wait.
Okay.
Dr. Joseph, we want to thank you for coming, and we are so grateful for your time to explain all this to all of us. And on behalf of Cresta College and the veteran and Karen Andrews, who is the veteran coordinator, we have a wonderful token from the Crest grape, which is Cresta's cup and everything from San Luis Obispo.
Wow. Can I come next year too? Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions. I don't have anywhere to be. Thank you, guys.
Now, and you have a microphone because they're North County campus. So, if you have some questions, raise your hands. I'll get to you.
And thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi.
You talked about veterans having social support while in the service. How do you differentiate between that and the camaraderie they feel? What is social support in that context?
I think the social support that most veterans, not all veterans, I would hate to overgeneralize. There are veterans that have really bad social experiences in the military, but for the most part, that social support is what I was talking about earlier, the willingness to just do anything. Oh, you're moving to a new apartment? What time do you need me there? I'll be there. I'll help you carry. Like, it's that willingness to help at all, whatever you need and in all hours of the day, and we're all in this together. That is a function of the camaraderie that you have when you're in the service, and you don't necessarily, you can have lots of friends out here, you can have a lot of Facebook friends, but they may not be there when you need help moving to another apartment, or then you need a ride, or your car breaks down, or something like that. And so that's, to me, that's the difference. Yeah, you're welcome. If anyone else has a question. Yeah.
So, just kind of going back to how that guy was prescribed opiates.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because I know they're known for making violent mood swings. So why would you prescribe such kind of a unique drug to a veteran?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily. I'm not allowed to prescribe. But I think what happens is you have veterans that come home with incredible amounts of pain, just physical pain, and doctors are caring people, and what they have available to them are pain medications, and those pain medications work for the pain. But they can, in his case with PTSD, for example, it causes, they're also addictive and they can cause other problems. And I think what happens sometimes is that because of the way the VA works, they're so busy and it's so hard to get an appointment, they sign you the pills and there isn't a ton of follow-up about how you're using them. And so you get this refilled and refilled and refilled, and the part that needs to happen is all this follow-up, and it just doesn't always.
I'm reconciling with my ex-husband, and
have different ways of parenting issues. Is there any resources you can recommend that we can work together on our parenting?
I would definitely like to suggest the Vet Center as one place to start. If they don't know who does that, if they don't do it themselves, that's something that they would be able to refer you. But one of the things that happens, and this may not happen in your family, but it happens sometimes, is that sometimes veterans, when they get out of the service, they confuse how to act like a soldier or Marine with how to parent. And sometimes we have to, I don't mean to devalue the way the parenting is done, but sometimes the way that you might, for example, teach your recruits is not necessarily the way you would teach your children. Because in the Marine Corps, you're being prepared to fight battles. We're not really parenting our children for that. We're teaching them, hopefully, other things. And so sometimes it's just there's a cultural adaptation that needs to be made around, wait a minute, the military taught you to be these certain ways, but their goal was to get you from point A to point B, and that's different from what we're trying to do. But yeah, I would definitely try the Vet Center, and they'll know kind of what else is out there if they don't do it.
He lives in another state, so it would have to be media.
That could be done. Yeah, that could be done. They do telehealth and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and if they don't, they'll be able to refer you. But to your larger point, I think that's all the time we're talking to veterans. I hear veterans come and they say, yeah, I know exactly how to teach my kids. It's the way that I learned in basic training. And I always say, well, yeah, accountability is a good thing to teach your kids and responsibility, but that's not what basic training was for. And that can be an adjustment, kind of, how do I take what I learned from the military but apply it in context to this new situation? And the military doesn't teach you that because they don't care. Their job is to get you to do this other thing. And so helping somebody take those skills but apply them to today and where you're at now can take a little bit of work. Yeah. Any other questions, thoughts? I'm going to stick around for a little while if anyone wants to talk to me. But again, thank you guys very, very much. Appreciate it.